It was a little inconclusive, and I believe there were some who will not be named who actually fell asleep halfway through.
Don't name them, Pat.
We will
Don't
not
name
name
them.
them. I will not name them. But nevertheless, the gloves were off in a tough debate between President Obama and Governor Mitt Romney. Neither candidate backed down.
Pat, they confronted each other on everything from jobs and the economy to the terrorist attack in Libya. David Brody has a story from Long Island, New York.
After a listless performance during the first debate in Denver, it didn't take long for President Obama to come out swinging in the second one.
Governor, when you were governor of Massachusetts, you stood in front of a coal plant and pointed at it and said, "This plant kills," and took great pride in shutting it down.
For his part, Romney stayed aggressive with the president.
You'll get your chance in a moment. I'm still speaking.
Especially on this exchange when he hit the Obama administration on their energy policy, saying that the president has a poor record on drilling for oil.
Production on government land is down.
No, it isn't.
Production on government land of oil is down 14%.
Governor,
and production on gas is down 9%.
It's just not true.
It's absolutely true.
The candidates also sparred over China. Romney said he would get tough with them on trade, and that led to this testy personal exchange.
Keep in mind that Governor Romney invested in companies that were pioneers of outsourcing to China. Governor, you're the last person who's going to get tough on China.
Mr. President, have you looked at your pension?
You know, I don't look at my pension. It's not as big as yours, so it doesn't take as long.
Let me give you some advice.
I don't check it that often.
Let me give you some advice. Look at your pension. You also have investments in Chinese companies.
Beyond the back and forth, both men spent a good part of the time trying to paint the other's economic plan as the wrong course for America.
And Governor Romney says he's got a 5-point plan. Governor Romney doesn't have a 5-point plan. He has a 1-point plan. And that plan is to make sure that folks at the top play by a different set of rules.
He said that by now we'd have unemployment at 5.4%. The difference between where it is and 5.4% is 9 million Americans without work. I wasn't the one that said 5.4%. This was the president's plan. Didn't get there.
There was also a blast from the past. Romney was asked about how he'd be different from President Bush, and he gave a few different ways.
I'm going to get us to a balanced budget. President Bush didn't.
President Obama couldn't help but chime in.
You know, there are some things where Governor Romney is different from George Bush. George Bush didn't propose turning Medicare into a voucher.
Out of all the topics, it was the controversy over the U.S. Embassy attack in Benghazi, Libya, that proved one of the strongest exchanges. Romney suggested that the president may have withheld information about whether the incident was a terrorist attack or not.
I think you have to ask yourself, why didn't we know 5 days later when the ambassador to the United Nations went on TV to say that this was a demonstration? How could we have not known?
And the suggestion that anybody in my team, whether the Secretary of State, our UN ambassador, anybody on my team would play politics or mislead when we've lost 4 of our own, Governor, is offensive. That's not what we do.
While the #1 issue on voters' minds is the economy, that will not be the subject of the final debate next week in Boca Raton, Florida. Instead, it'll be all about foreign policy, and the Romney camp believes they have a major opening on the Obama administration's handling of the Benghazi embassy attack in Libya. David Brody, CBN News, at Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York.
Well, there's some who wondered why would the campaigns go to New York? That isn't a favorable state for Romney, and why Hofstra? You say, why didn't he go to Ohio or some other state like that where he could maybe gain some votes? But I don't think that, and you found it rather somnambulant.
Well, I'll put it this way. I mean, I appreciated the spice in Obama this round. You know, round one, he was kind of lackadaisical. There was some spice there. Romney, he was fighting just as hard. So it was an interesting duel, but I do have to admit, I don't know if I started to kind of get tired because of the duel, or it was just a late night.
It was tiresome.
My eyes started to daze a little bit.
The president really misstates the facts. I mean, it's offensive that you would claim any member of my administration covered up. Well, they covered up for a whole cotton-picking week. And, you know, to say that they didn't, that's offensive. Well, this is a debate tactic. And then to claim that the increase in oil production was somehow his doing is just absolutely outrageous. The fracking that went on, the EPA basically was either neutral or opposed. They opposed the Keystone pipeline coming in from Canada that would give us a new source of crude for our refineries. I mean, it was just ridiculous. He still shut the thing down. It still hasn't cleared his government. And for him to say, well, look, I want abundance of energy. I want us to be energy independent. Nonsense. And another one of the companies that they backed has just gone belly up. They just declared bankruptcy the last couple of days. So you've got Solyndra, $500 million or so. And he can't defend that. So the way to defend it is to go after his opponent, and that's what they're doing. And looking like he's strong, you know, that's not true. Well, what he said, Romney said, was true, but it's a debate audience unless you've got a fact checker coming out. And I think Candy Crowley was in the president's camp. At least there are people who think that. You didn't watch it long enough to know, did you?
I did, Pat. I watched it long enough to know, and it was fascinating. I have to admit, like many Americans out there, there are many of us who are torn either way. You know, which way to go.
I wasn't fascinated. That stuff.
You were fascinated.
Yeah, it gets me sick. All right. I like, you know, the first one was, you know, very well done, and Jim Lehrer was a tremendous moderator because he kept his hands off of it. Well, let's see what the political pundits had to say about the debate. Lee Webb has that story from the CBN newsroom. Lee?
Pat, Greg Sargent of the Washington Post says the debate was a boost for the president. He writes, this race will still be the dead heat tomorrow that it was yesterday, but Obama made big strides towards turning things around. Fred Barnes of the Weekly Standard doesn't think it would help the president's campaign. That Obama was stronger, he writes, last night doesn't mitigate the dire effects of the first nationally televised clash with Romney on October 3rd. And Jeff Greenfield of Yahoo News doesn't believe it will make a difference for those whose minds were changed by that first debate. While it's clear that Obama's performance will revive the enthusiasm of his supporters, it seems unlikely that it will cause those impressed by Romney to reconsider. And Ron Fournier of the National Journal sums up the views of many analysts by saying Democratic and Republican partisans will find reason to celebrate the debate, but it likely did nothing to reshape the closely fought race. Businesses and investors in France are deeply worried now about the policies of new socialist President Francois Hollande. The head of one business group tells the London Telegraph that bankruptcies have skyrocketed and investors have lost confidence. And she says the new policies border on economic illiteracy. Another group has sent out a protest called State of Emergency for Business. France has had little economic growth for more than a year now. The Montana State Supreme Court has ordered a school district to pay $70,000 in attorney fees for banning a valedictorian from speaking at her graduation. The Butte School District told Renee Griffith she could not speak at her graduation 5 years ago because her speech contained religious references. The speech included this sentence, "I don't let fear keep me from sharing Christ and his joy with those around me." The school superintendent told Griffith she had to take out the references to God and Christ. She filed a complaint with the Montana Human Rights Bureau. A lower court sided with the school district, but the Montana Supreme Court ruled 6-1 later on that Griffith's free speech rights were violated. It's rare for earthquakes to strike the East Coast, but a magnitude 4.0 quake hit near Portland, Maine last night. It was felt throughout New England, and as Mark Martin reports, it caught a lot of folks by surprise.
So I figured maybe it was just me. You're telling me it's not just me?
Here's the proof it was not just him. The seismograph reading showing the 4.0 magnitude earthquake that hit southern Maine. The U.S. Geological Survey says the epicenter was about 3 miles west of Hollis Center, Maine, about 3 miles deep. That's about 20 miles west of Portland.
My bed was shaking back and forth, and I wasn't quite sure what it was.
Yeah, honestly, I just thought they were doing construction across the street.
4.0 means that this is the largest earthquake since 2006, when we had a 4.2 centered at Bar Harbor, Maine.
And I was working, and I felt dizzy, and I thought,
Residents in Vermont, New Hampshire, eastern Massachusetts, and as far south as Rhode Island and Connecticut felt the earthquake. There are no reports of aftershocks, serious damage, or injuries.
It vibrated my couch, like behind me, and so it felt like something was behind my couch.
In eastern United States, earthquakes are felt over a much bigger area than they are in western United States, out in California. Because the crust is different. The crust is colder, the crust is thinner, and so when earthquakes occur, the effects are transmitted much greater distances.
Residents in New England got a head start on a worldwide earthquake drill coming up this week. More than 14 million people around the globe are scheduled to take part in the Great Shakeout Drill, which helps folks practice on how to stay safe during earthquakes. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Yeah, Pat, Mark showed us a view of the Prudential building in downtown Boston. I would not have wanted to be on the top floor of that building when that quake hit last night.
Well, that thing's been a mess. When it started, the windows pop out, as I understand, because they didn't account for all the wind that's caused by those canyons that are built by those big skyscrapers. So it's been subject to some difficulties. But we had a big one, Lee, you remember, here in Virginia, up around Henrico County, and I mean, that thing was a monster, and it cracked the Washington Monument, I believe.
Talking about the one last year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember it?
Yes.
I know, me too. I was sitting in Starbucks and everything started shaking bacon.
And your coffee was sloshing.
I know, it was going like this. I thought Jesus was coming back. I said, oh, the earth isn't moving.
I paid big bucks for that latte. I'm not going to have it washed away. It was a monster, and it had repercussions all the way into Ohio and up and throughout the Capitol. It was a big one. But you know, read the 24th chapter of the prophet Isaiah, and he talks about the earth tottering like a shack. And Jesus said there'll be earthquakes in many places. So that's one of the things that happened. But this earth we live on floats. These tectonic plates move. And when they move, it shakes. Scary.
Very scary. That's why we got to get our life right. Because tomorrow's not promised.
Well, here's something that is shaking, too, all around the country. People are shaking with obesity. Lee.
Pat, being obese can cause cancer cells to grow faster, we're told. Researchers did a study on mice. They found that tumors basically recruit stem cells from fat tissue when they need more nourishment. So being overweight can make your cancer worse. The World Health Organization says there were more than 1 billion obese adults worldwide in 2008, and by some estimates, more than half of Americans will be obese in a couple of years. So this is just more incentive, Pat, for us all to keep an eye on our weight.
That's good.
Well, you know, something has happened to me.
What has happened to you, Pat Robertson?
I've lost my appetite.
Really?
I just don't feel like eating. Yesterday, I didn't. I used to love eating breakfast. I didn't want any breakfast. I didn't eat any breakfast. I came to the show. I didn't have any breakfast.
I never have that problem. I love food. Love it.
Well, you just stay so slim.
Because I always suck it in, Pat. That's why.
You run and work out and do all kinds of exercises.
That's true.
And you chase your little boy around the house, and that burns off a lot of calories.
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
Minnesota voters will decide on a state constitutional amendment to define marriage as between one man and one woman. Religious leaders are speaking out on both sides of the issue. Some gathered to protest the amendment Tuesday. They say it limits basic rights and violates their belief in love and acceptance. Catholic, Muslim, Mormon, and evangelical leaders rallied in support of the amendment.
This is not a new position for us as Catholics. It's really at the core of what we believe about marriage. And so we're defending what has been a truth of our faith.
Polls show Minnesota voters are split on the marriage amendment. It needs more than 50% to pass. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital in Birmingham, England is tightening security after 2 people tried to get in to see an injured Pakistani teenager. Malala Yousafzai is recovering from a gunshot wound to the head. Police say 2 men claiming to be Malala's relatives were questioned and turned away. Malala was targeted by the Taliban in Pakistan for promoting girls' education and criticizing the militant group. Doctors say the girl is in stable condition and that she has a good chance to make a solid recovery. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.